Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Looks like we've got some really interesting stuff to dive into today. You guys sent in the Arcana of Silence.wave, and then let's see, we've also got its companion piece, the Arcana of Silence _2.pdf. And it looks like you really want us to dig into the main ideas behind what these sources call silence magic. And just as a heads up, this is not your typical self-improvement stuff. We're going pretty far out there today.
Definitely.
Yeah, we're talking about ideas that challenge, like, our everyday thinking, concepts like true will, this whole silence magic thing itself, and even negation sorcery.
Yeah, exactly. And for those of you following along in the Arcana of Silence _2.pdf, you'll see it's laid out pretty clearly. It walks us through foundation, silent manifestation, reality engineering, then integration, and finally, negation sorcery.
Mm.
And as we get into some of these more, shall we say, out there ideas, it's probably a good idea to keep that key concepts and terms section handy.
Right. Good point.
Yeah.
So our mission, as you've laid it out for us, is to really understand, like, the core of the silence thing.
For sure.
Because when these sources talk about silence, they're not, like, just telling you to meditate more or find some quiet time. It's way more than that.
Much deeper.
Yeah, they're saying it's a fundamental force, like an active force. It's like the foundation of reality itself.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting right at the beginning, like square one. Silence is the source. What are we talking about here?
I think the most important idea, and it's a powerful one, is that silence is, it precedes everything else. In fact, the source material says it pretty clearly. Before the first word was spoken, before the first thought was formed, before will, before action, silence was already moving.
Wow.
Right. And what's really interesting here is that silence isn't just empty nothingness. It's not a void. It's more like a pre-existing state full of potential. They call this the pre-thought state. Imagine like a blank canvas. But on this canvas, every single possible reality exists, but in a totally unformed state.
Yeah.
And this silence magic, that's where it operates, right at this level.
So this is like totally different from how we usually think about magic, right? It's not about waving wands or chanting spells. And the source material actually makes a distinction. It contrasts magic as force, all that stuff, rituals, willpower, directing energy, with what they call magic as presence. What's the big difference for you?
Well, think about it this way. Have you ever tried to force something to happen and it just doesn't work out? Like it feels like pushing a rock uphill.
All the time, yeah.
Right. But then there are those times when things just click, effortlessly. Traditional magic with all the rituals and willpower, that often feels like that forcing. But this silence magic, it's all about alignment. It's about aligning with what already exists in that field of potential.
I'm with you.
Yeah, and that brings us to the law of alignment. The idea is that the reality you want, it's not something you have to create from scratch. It already exists. The key is to dissolve the resistance, what they call resistance anyway. It's that feeling of separation, that feeling that what you want is somehow like out of reach.
Okay, so it's more like instead of building a new reality, you're just like choosing from one that already exists.
Exactly. It's a shift in perspective for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So the sources introduced this figure, Nix Nuit. Who is that? What's their role in all of this?
Right. So Nix Nuit, it's kind of fusion. It embodies the infinite space that was there even before thought existed. So you've got Nyx from Greek mythology. She's the goddess of night. And she's combined with Nuit from Thelema, this cosmic mother figure. Together, they represent like that primordial source. They call it the cosmic womb of silence. And from that womb, all these realities are born. What's really emphasized is this absolute surrender to Nyx Nuit. It's about letting go completely, letting go of the resistance, that feeling of separation. And in doing that, you align with the flow of reality effortlessly.
So if we're talking about Nix Nuit as this like ultimate void, does that mean that all our wanting and striving is actually kind of pointless?
It really makes you question those things, doesn't it? Like all that effort, all that desire, if everything already exists, then wanting something so badly implies that it's missing, that you're separate from it. But the source material is suggesting that if you really embrace the infinity of Nix Nuit, you realize that, well, everything is already inherently available. That's a game changer, right?
Yeah, that's a huge shift. Okay, so another big idea in these sources is true will. We've talked about true will on the show before, but how do these sources define it? It doesn't seem like they're just talking about getting what you want, like your ego wants.
You're right. This idea of true will is different from how it's usually understood. Often it's connected to ambition or like a really strong intention to get something done. But here they're saying it's not about your personal wishes or ego desires. It's about the natural, effortless movement of reality. Like, it's already in motion.
They use this really cool analogy. They compare it to a river flowing to the ocean. Like, it's inevitable. It's just going to happen. And all our desires and struggles, those are like trying to dam the river or divert it, which only creates like resistance and friction.
Exactly. And there's a quote that sums this up perfectly. True will is not something to be found, nor is it a direction to follow. It is the movement of nix nuit limitless, vast, unknowable flowing through the point of singular awareness that you call yourself. The emphasis here is that it's already happening. You don't have to find it or force it. It's more about stopping the interference.
So that leads us to presence magic and this idea of effortless motion. It sounds like this is what it actually feels like to be aligned with that deeper current.
Yes. Presence magic is about experiencing silence magic directly in your everyday life. It's a state of being where reality seems to shift around you effortlessly. The Source describes it this way. Presence is the purest form of magic. It does not push, it does not pull, it does not direct, it simply moves, and in doing so, everything aligns around it.
So true will is the underlying flow, and presence magic is how it feels when you're in tune with it, when you're not resisting. The sources give these examples, like doors opening just as you approach, conversations just flowing naturally, obstacles kind of disappearing. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
All the time, actually. And that's exactly what it feels like. It's not about trying to bend reality to your will. It's about being in a state where your internal resistance is so low that reality naturally flows in a more harmonious way. It's that difference between struggling and simply being present.
Right, right. Okay, so we've talked about silence as the source aligning with it and how that shows up as presence magic. Now, the sources talk about the void. This isn't just emptiness, is it? It's something more, right?
Yeah, definitely. They make it very clear that the void isn't empty. It's not nothingness. Instead, it's pure potential, completely undifferentiated. Every single reality exists there, but in an unmanifested state. And there's a key principle connected to the void, non-interference. This means allowing reality to just unfold without trying to control or manipulate it. It's about deep, deep alignment.
But that's like the opposite of how most of us live, right? We're so goal-oriented, always trying to make things happen, just letting things be. That's tough.
It is a challenge. But the sources connect this void to some pretty deep ideas from various traditions. Ein Sof, Mu, the Abyss. These are all concepts that point to realms beyond our usual way of thinking and interfering. And then they introduce the silent witness, which is like the ultimate expression of non-interference. It's about observing reality without judgment, without reacting, without clinging to any outcome, like finding that stillness in the middle of everything.
Okay, so that sounds pretty abstract. But then the sources bring it down to earth, literally, by talking about the body. How does the body fit into all of this?
Yeah, this is where it gets really fascinating. They're saying that your body is actually an extension of silence, that it starts moving before your conscious thoughts even catch up. And there's actually neuroscience that backs this up, this idea of pre-motion. The argument is that any problem in the body, any dysfunction, it comes from resistance. And when you align with silence, your body functions naturally, effortlessly, like it's supposed to.
And there's that quote, the body moves before thought. True will acts before the mind decides. The silent magician does not force movement, they dissolve into it. So stillness, true stillness, it's not about not moving at all. It's about moving without resistance, flowing.
Exactly. It's like, think of a really skilled dancer. Their movements are so precise, but they look effortless. That's the kind of stillness and motion they're describing. It's like the natural state of your body is effortless movement. That's all the mental stuff, the resistance that gets in the way.
So then we have Hoare-Parkrot. Who is this guy and why is he important in this whole silence magic thing?
Right, so Hoare-Parkrot is a thelemic deity. He's often pictured as a silent child inside an egg surrounded by darkness.
Okay.
In this framework of silence magic, he represents like the embodiment of silence as this active force, that pre-thought state we've been talking about. He is true will, but before it's even known. The sources describe him as, I am the babe in the egg of the heart of silence. I am the invisible light wherein all things exist. I am not heard or spoken, yet through me all things are realized.
So his power isn't about doing things or like forcing things to happen. It's about this stillness, this potential. And they're saying that by tuning into his current, we can actually get rid of our own resistance.
That's interesting, the idea of achieving something by doing nothing.
Yeah, it's a paradox. But the point is that real action sometimes, it's about removing the obstacles, not pushing harder. When you align with that potential that Hoare-Parkrot embodies, you allow reality to just happen without interfering. And the interference is often the problem in the first place. We've been talking about silence as this, like, underlying energy. But the sources also talk about how the silence shows up in communication. They call it the silent voice. It's not just about being quiet, though, right?
Not at all. The silent voice, it's about communicating from a place of pure presence, not from your thoughts. It's transmitting understanding directly without all the misinterpretations that can happen with words. They say words are echoes, but silence is the source. The strongest message is not spoken. It is known.
So it's about aligning with a truth that's already understood on a deeper level. And when you embody that alignment, reality can shift without you having to explain everything or convince anyone. It's not about sending information. It's about, like, clearing the static so the other person, or even, like, reality itself, can recognize what's already there. Have you ever had that experience where you just knew something without anyone saying it?
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what they're talking about, is that deeper connection, that shared understanding that goes beyond words.
And that idea of this deeper, unseen connection takes us to the space between dreams and waking life. The sources say that the division we usually see between those two states, it's actually an illusion.
Right. They suggest that both our dreams and our waking life, they're both part of the same silent current of the unseen. Dreams aren't separate, they're not fantasies. They're just waking life without all the filters and limitations of your conscious mind.
And that space between the two, that moment when you're falling asleep or waking up, that's a powerful state of pure silence. It's a direct link to that flow of reality.
Yeah, and by paying attention to that in-between state, you can start to see how fluid reality really is. It's where the boundaries we usually perceive start to dissolve.
Now, this next idea is pretty wild. The silence of objects and sigilless magic. How can an object be powerful by being empty of intention?
It's a paradox.
Yeah.
But the sources suggest that objects can become powerful not because we put energy into them, but because we don't. It's about leaving them untouched by our intentions.
Mhm.
You put it like this. The strongest sigil is the one that does not need to be drawn. The most powerful tool is the one that does nothing at all.
So sigilless magic, that's where your intention is strongest when it's not spoken, not seen. It's pure knowing. And you just step into the reality where what you want already exists. You don't need a symbol. You don't need a ritual. And these silent objects, they're powerful because they're not interfered with. They reflect that pure potential. Have you ever held an object that just felt powerful and you couldn't explain why?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's that raw potential just waiting to be tapped into.
The sources then get into some pretty heavy topics. Death and rebirth. How do they see those things through this silence magic lens?
Well, they say that death and rebirth aren't separate events. They're simultaneous states. It's a constant cycle of returning to and emerging from silence. And that involves letting go of the idea of a fixed identity. The moment between death and rebirth, the in-between, that's where the real power is. Because nothing is defined. The source says, there's a moment before death completes itself. A moment before rebirth begins. In that space, nothing is lost. Nothing is gained. Only silence remains.
So silent death, it's not the end. It's a letting go of who you think you are without struggling. It's recognizing that your identity is fluid, temporary.
Right. It's about understanding the cyclical nature of everything. Endings are just transitions to new beginnings within the vastness of silence.
And that brings us to the dissolution of identity. This feels like a really important part of all this.
It is. They argue that being attached to a fixed sense of self is what creates most of our resistance to change, most of our limitations. They ask, most resist change because they are afraid to lose themselves. But what if the self was never solid to begin with?
They're saying our identity is just a story, something our minds create and hold on to. And true liberation comes from letting go of that story and learning to move as this formless current, unrestricted by who we think we are, who we think we should be.
It's about tapping into that boundless freedom that comes with recognizing how fluid and interconnected everything really is.
So then we have this idea of the silent priesthood. This isn't like a real group, is it?
No, it's not an organization. It's more like a state of being. It's an inner alignment with silence, an unseen force that shapes reality just by being in tune with it. The source paints this picture. The silent magician does not seek recognition. They do not declare their presence. They move through the world unseen, yet their influence is everywhere.
It's about the power of just being, influencing, without needing to force anything or prove anything. And silent blessing, that's about changing reality just by being present, not by intervening.
Exactly. It's about embodying that effortless alignment and letting it radiate outward. subtly but powerfully.
The sources also share a personal story about a near-death experience, and they talk about Odin triggering it. How does this experience relate to silence magic?
Well, it's a powerful example of what it means to surrender and align completely. In that near-death experience, there was no choice but to let go of control, to dissolve all resistance. And the key takeaway is that survival in that state was effortless. Life and death, they were just movements within silence, happening without any struggle. The source says, life moved, death moved, and I moved with them. This was the purest form of silence magic.
So it's about trusting the underlying flow, letting go of the need to control every outcome.
Exactly.
Then the sources talk about how these ideas apply to bigger systems like governments, belief systems, social structure.
Right. They suggest that all these systems, even though they seem so solid, they only exist because we believe in them, because we all agree to play by their rules. The source states, a system is only real for as long as one believes in it. The moment belief dissolves, the structure collapses. In silence, all systems are already gone.
So silent alignment in this context, it's about dissolving those systems by simply not participating. You just step outside of them without having to fight them.
Okay.
And you can move between those systems freely because you recognize that they're not real, not ultimately. Have you ever felt trapped by a system and then found a way to just mentally step outside of it?
Absolutely. And that's exactly the kind of freedom they're talking about. It's about realizing the power of non-participation.
The sources then describe what they call the final form. This sounds like the ultimate goal, the culmination of everything.
It is. It's the point where the separation between you and the practice disappears completely. As the source says, at the end of all seeking, all questioning, all effort, there is only silence. All the techniques, all the tools, they were just temporary. They were there to help you realize that you don't need them.
And that leads to the concept of non-being. It's like letting go of even being a magician or a seeker, recognizing that the self is fluid and part of that greater silence.
Right. It's about surrendering to the boundless nature of reality, understanding that your individual identity is just a tiny part of something much, much larger.
So what does it mean to live as silence? What does that actually look like?
They describe it as moving effortlessly, being in total alignment, without doubts or conflicts or the need for anyone to see you. There is no need to declare silence, no need to claim mastery, no need to show power. The one who moves as silence does not need to be seen because they are already present in all things. The silent adept moves through different realities without getting attached, without leaving any resistance behind.
That's a powerful image, moving without a trace, influencing just by being.
Exactly. And the ultimate realization is that you become the silent current itself, where there's no separation anymore.
And the sources end this whole section by reminding us that the arcana of silence isn't just a bunch of ideas, it's a living force.
Right. Silence is not a concept. It is not a philosophy. It is not a technique. It is the force that moves through all things. At this level, there's no more striving, no more effort. You just exist in that effortless presence, and reality naturally aligns with it. You realize that the separation was never real.
Okay, so the last part of the second PDF is about silence magic and negation sorcery. This seems like a really important, maybe even counterintuitive addition to everything we've talked about.
It is. They're saying that negation saying, I don't want this, isn't resistance, which is how it's often presented. It's actually a way of selecting what you do want by excluding what you don't. It's like communicating directly with your consciousness.
So instead of trying to change your subconscious mind with affirmations, you can be just as effective, maybe even more effective, by clearly defining what you don't want. And both affirmation and negation, they both have their place.
Right. And what's really powerful here is the realization that you don't need to change who you are to experience a different reality. You just need to choose it. The act of selection, that's what's important. And it can happen right now. You are already the person who can shift realities.
And this brings us to a really big statement. You never needed to change. You only needed to select. That challenges the whole idea that we need to work on ourselves constantly before we can have what we want.
Definitely. It questions that whole self-improvement thing. Because alignment, in this context, is not something you earn. It's just inherent in choosing. You don't have to become someone else.
And here's another twist. The sources actually defend the ego in defense of the ego. And usually in most spiritual and magical teachings, the ego is the enemy, right?
Right. But they're saying that the ego isn't inherently bad. It's actually a necessary tool for choosing and navigating reality. The problem isn't the ego itself. is how we misunderstand it and all the negative stuff we associate with it.
So the ego isn't something to get rid of. It's the bridge between that infinite presence and our ability to make choices, to have unique experiences.
Exactly. It allows us to have specific experiences within all those possibilities.
The sources then wrap up with evolving ancient practices through silence magic. How does this relate to like all the existing spiritual and magical traditions? Does it replace them?
No, not at all. They say that silence magic isn't about getting rid of those traditions. It's about completing them, stripping away all the unnecessary effort and revealing the core truths. The source puts it this way: all traditions point toward the same truth. Silence magic does not reject these traditions. It completes them.
And they give some really cool examples. Shamanic journeying without the actual journey, the emptiness of Zen without all the years of seeking, Christian contemplation without the words, manifestation without wanting, energy work without effort. They're saying that silence was always the source, the key to unlocking the potential of these practices.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the essence of these traditions is that inner stillness, that alignment, and silence magic gives you a direct path to that.
And the ultimate realization is that even the act of choosing dissolves into pure presence. The real truth is that we were never bound by anything.
And that the need to learn magic is just another illusion, a stepping stone to realizing our inherent freedom. And the message is, you can choose a different reality right now. It's always available.
So to sum up this deep dive, it's about moving away from all that struggle, all that effort, the need to constantly improve ourselves. It's about aligning with that underlying silence and the power of choosing.
It really is a completely different way of looking at how we create our reality.
And here's something for you to think about. Now that you've explored this idea of effortless selection and the understanding that you're not as limited as you might think, what reality will you choose to align with right now? Take some time to consider how these ideas could change how you see your own power and the infinite potential that exists in that silent heart of reality.